Good evening and welcome to the book launch for the new anthology, Waking Up to the Earth, Connecticut Poets in a Time of Global Climate Crisis. Edited by Connecticut's State Poet Laureate, Margaret Gibson, and published by Grayson Books. This book launch is brought to you by Riverwood Poetry Series and Real Artways. My name is Pat Hale. I'm a member of the Board of Directors for Riverwood and am so pleased and honored to welcome you to this special event. Tonight, in just a few minutes, you'll hear Margaret Gibson speak about the anthology, following which 13 Connecticut poets will read their poems from Waking Up to the Earth. And after that, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions and make comments. Those questions and comments can be entered into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Chat is not available in this webinar. Also, if you'd like to just have your screen on speaker view, you can do that by going up to the upper right-hand corner, or you can have gallery view, which lets you see everyone at once. So just a few quick notes about Riverwood and Real Artways. Riverwood Poetry Series is an all-volunteer, nonprofit organization with the mission of bringing poetry to the greater Hartford area. We've been doing this for over a dozen years now, bringing readings, festivals, workshops, and open mics to the greater Hartford area. We've also hosted regionally and nationally known poets at our podium. And for the last couple of years, we've been doing that at Real Artways. We've partnered with them. Before the pandemic hit, we held our readings in one of their art galleries. Now they continue to be our production partner, helping us with the technology, thank God, also providing publicity and other support. Ian Ali Seals of Real Artways is with us tonight in the director's chair. Thank you, Ian, for your help. I also want to thank Megan Bent for our beautiful flyers and other assistance with publicity, and all the folks at Real Artways. Just to mention our board members, Riverwood's board consists of Julia Paul, Joan Hofmann, Sherry Bedingfield, Debbie Gilbert, Kathleen McIntosh, and myself. Our events are held the second Tuesday of the month, generally from September through May. On Tuesday, May 11th, we're bringing you Vivian Shipley, and that will be followed by an open mic. For reasons of time, we won't have an open mic tonight. We have 13 poets reading. We want to give you, our audience, a taste of the poetry contained in Waking Up to the Earth, and also a chance to respond to what you hear. So again, we'll have a short Q&A, and you can enter your questions and comments into the Q&A, which is at the bottom of the screen. So I'll be making announcements about upcoming events at the end of the evening. And right now, we'll go on to our program. It is my great pleasure to introduce Margaret Gibson. She'll have a chance to talk about this project she's put her heart into, and then you'll hear the 13 poets. And after that, I think I'm repeating myself. And Margaret Gibson currently serves as Connecticut's 7th Poet Laureate. She has published 12 books of poetry, most recently, Not Hearing the Wood Thrush, but her 13th is due out this coming August. It's entitled The Glass Globe and will be published by LSU Press. She's also written a memoir entitled The Prodigal Daughter, Reclaiming an Unfinished Childhood. Her debut poetry volume, Long Walks in the Afternoon, was awarded the Lamont Selection from the Academy of American Poets. She has many additional honors, including a National Endowment from the Arts Fellowship, the James Boatwright Prize, the Melville Kane Award from the Poetry Society of America, the Connecticut Center for the Book Award in Poetry, and 3 Pushcart Prizes. Her work is known nationally and internationally. She's widely published in journals and in numerous anthologies. I'll just name a few. Best American Poetry 2009, Best American Poetry 2017, Beneath a Single Moon, Buddhism in Contemporary Poetry, The Forgotten Language, Contemporary Poets and Nature, and Atomic Ghost, Poets Respond to the Nuclear Age. Margaret has taught at several colleges and universities, ranging from George Mason to Connecticut College to the University of Connecticut, and has served as a writer in residence at many more schools, colleges, and universities. But rather than list all of her publications and her teaching experience, I want to focus on the unique perspective Margaret brings to poetry and to the position of Poet Laureate. And to do that, I'm going to steal a lot of words from her website, because she says it so well. This is what she says about writing poetry. Writing poetry is an act of attention and receptivity. You study whatever it is that strikes your attention, whether a scarlet tanager, river, field, or forest. You take what's given into that part of the self that inquires, tests, embraces, and embodies. Outer and inner coalesce and fuse. She sees a connectedness. Everything is ultimately connected. Everything, therefore, is both personal and impersonal. We're part of an enormous, sometimes painful, sometimes joyful experience of unfolding consciousness. And this is my favorite part. We're here to find the things that are broken and to mend them, to find where there is fracture or division and to create a wholeness. As Connecticut State Poet Laureate, Margaret Gibson has taken as her focus poetry and the environment during the climate crisis. She's been awarded an Academy of American Poets grant for Poets Laureate, and with a portion of that grant has funded this anthology. She is also funding videos of Connecticut poets reading their poems in natural settings, as well as in poetry programs in green poetry cafes. In an article in Connecticut Magazine, Margaret is quoted as saying that she wants to green the State Poet Laureate position, to be able to give voice to the fact that what we're doing to the planet is endangering it and us and our children's lives and our grandchildren's lives. She says she sees today's poets as having a double mission. In addition to issuing that warning, they can also write about our relationship to the living world and help others fall in love with it. Out of this sense of interconnectedness and this double mission to warn and celebrate comes the anthology we're here to celebrate tonight. Please join me in welcoming Margaret Gibson to the podium.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you, Riverwood, all of you who have contributed over the years to this wonderful poetry reading series. And for this particular reading, I want to offer special thanks to Joan Hofmann, who helped shape the program, and to Pat Hale and Julia Paul for keeping me on track, and to Real Artways for their technical savvy. It's been a great pleasure for me as Connecticut Poet Laureate to be involved in the many projects that Pat actually has mentioned in her introduction. My intent is to bring the attention to poetry and the earth, poetry and the environment, poetry in a time of global climate crisis. And with the grant from the Academy of American Poets, I've been able to support a number of programs, including this very anthology, which was published by Grayson Books in Hartford, Connecticut. I want to sound out a special thank you to poet Jenny Connors, who runs Grayson Books, for her enthusiasm for this project. You can go to Grayson Books' website, www.graysonbooks.com, and order a copy. And I hope, if you haven't already, that tonight's reading will convince you that you really need this anthology. This evening, you will be hearing from a selection of poets whose work is in the anthology. And because there are so many of us, for the sake of saving time, we're not making individual introductions. I'm going to try to give you a composite snapshot of tonight's readers as a group. First, let me say that when we invited poets to participate, to send in poems for the anthology, we put out the call into every corner and every neighborhood that we could think of in Connecticut, and we received over 1,000 poems. And I want to thank all of the poets in Connecticut who sent in poems for their poems and for their convictions and for their love of the earth. We ended up taking the work of 63 poets, 13 of whom are here tonight. It's a wonderfully various group tonight. It includes a 2-time NEA Poetry Fellowship winner, one gifted poet who is also known for her delicate and tender drawings of the natural world, 2 Robert Pinsky Global Fellowship winners who happen to be married, the first town poet laureate of New Britain, who is a dean of students and a Grand Slam champion, and a co-editor of the Connecticut River Review, who is an early evening bat counter. We have with us a 2-time winner of the Connecticut Book Awards, a professor who is also an activist. We have an elder law attorney who is the first town poet laureate of Manchester. We have a generous spirit and a wonderful poet and a champion poetry networker with us, and a professor emerita who is an avid hiker and traveler and watcher of the rivers and the trees. I'm not telling you more about them for time's sake, but also in the spirit of our anthology, which is not organized by poet, but by poem. The opening poems in the anthology venture out mindfully to pay attention to the other, to creatures, including rivers, forests, ecosystems, all the other sentient beings who live with us on this planet. In many poems, there is the bright lens of praise. In others, the lens is darkened by the threat of extinction. I like to think of it as a trail map that winds through fauna and flora, through forests and waters of all sorts, rivers, oceans, rainstorms. In the anthology, we go through backyards, city parks, urban landscapes, even to a refuse dump in Ethiopia. A few poems make the connection between environmental injustice and social and racial injustice. As Chase Twitchell has said about this anthology, make no mistake, it's not just about Connecticut. These are poems about our world, our one and only world, and the damage we inflict on it. Waking up to the earth is a resounding wake-up call. And yet, how tender and intimate are the voices gathered here to offer poems that praise, poems that warn, poems that grieve, poems that offer us the human voice in its complex relationship to the earth. Although the poems contain exquisite portraits of the natural world, this is not nature writing. The book is one of personal witness, social witness, and climate change advocacy. And not one whit of this witness and advocacy is separate from the human heart and the wide awake imagination. These poems by the poets gathered here tonight and in the anthology are completely realized poems. I salute these poets: Robert Cording, Carol Chaput, Debbie Gilbert, Jim Finnegan, Joan Hofmann, Michael Chief Peterson, Luisa Caycedo-Kimura, Aaron Caycedo-Kimura, Pegi Dietz Shea, Pat Hale, Julia Paul, Jon Andersen. They will be reading in that order. So please join me in listening to this trail map of voices. I'll join you at the end of the book and read a poem and make a few more remarks. Thank you for being here. And I'll turn it now to Bob Cording, our first reader.
I'm reading a poem called Walking with Ruskin. The conceit of this poem is that I'm taking a walk with the dead Victorian writer, John Ruskin, who I've loved for some 50 odd years, I'd say. Walking with Ruskin. Each day I walk for an hour or two, what started as exercise, now a matter of devotion. Or, less grandly, walking gives me something to do, a kind of discipline, since I don't know how to move towards any of those big, intangible goals: wholeness, God, forgiveness, justice. But I know how to walk. Sometimes I bring Ruskin along. Despite his holy striving and cloying superlatives, the greatest thing a human soul does in the world is to see something, or art springs from the most profound admiration. I like the way he forgets himself in his concern for what is particular about an eagle's beak, or the green, brown, coppery iridescence of a pheasant's feather. He's teaching me a kind of readiness for what comes along as it pleases. A line of ants carrying the remains of a red emerald butterfly, or a brook in winter moving under ice like the one-celled life found in a drop of water under a microscope. I like to compare notes with him, to count the shades of blue on a kingfisher's back, or the 3 different kind of wing feathers, but I'm still learning to look at things with Ruskin's respect for fact and his love for what's being seen. This beetle, say, that's crossed our path, its 2 topside eyes ringed in white, the lacquer of its shell, a depth of black and darkest greens. Today, the late July pond water looks like used car oil, and the roadside grass is a pointillist study of greens and the bright white coffee cups of Americans who run on Dunkin'. Ruskin and I are looking at clouds, a kind of medicine. Ruskin says, they calm and purify, if only because the sky is large and we are not. And if I'm always half thinking of my credit card debt, or if I'm 7 or 10 years of mortgage life away from retirement, I go on crouching down for a beetle that doesn't care if it's seen, though my seeing it makes the day more real to me. Nothing much, but something I'm always thanking Ruskin for. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Carol Chaput. I am a poet and the artist that Margaret mentioned. And I like to spend as much time as I possibly can in the woods. which is where I hunt and gather all of my inspiration. This poem is called Ravens in Winter. Floating between earth's plane and sky's arch, a smudge, then a thickening of two or more. Their calls are prayers like lightning. The old ones say the flap of their wings calls forth thunder's clap. No wonder we fall to our knees as they wing along the edge of the sky over wind-scrubbed fields, always knowing where they are by the smell of the grasses and how the wind waves through crowns of trees. Weightless, they fall in a spill of cinders, of carbon shadows to the marsh, filling up everything that's empty and calling back and forth until the point of stillness. Always on the edge of my mind, watching the swoop, the dive, the soar, and sun. Wanting what Icarus wanted, no horizon, no boundary.
Thank you, Carol. That was beautiful. Your poem is so necessary, just gorgeous. I'm Debbie Gilbert, and it's such a pleasure to be reading with you all tonight. Thank you to Margaret for putting the anthology together. It surely will raise the awareness we need for global climate crisis that we're in. The poem I'm going to read for you tonight is called Bats. I'm the batty one. You see, I live pretty near to one of the MDC reservoirs. It's the one that borders Farmington and West Hartford. And, you know, like all the reservoirs, it has scads of acreage. And when we first moved here in 1991, there are lots of bats. They were everywhere. And I could watch them flit around in the summer evening and eat the bugs and all. And then a few years later, we noticed that they had nearly disappeared. And what we learned was that they were suffering from white nose syndrome, something that's also called smutty nose disease. And it's such an awful name. And it's an awful disease. It's a kind of a fungus that covers over their little muzzles and smothers them and kills them. And it was really sad. Well, I don't know how or why or what, but they're back. They've been recovering, and I'm really happy to say that over the past few years, I can count them, and I count more and more every night at dusk during the summer. So this poem is in celebration of the bats, who actually have kind of been given quite a lot of blame lately due to the coronavirus business. So surely we need to celebrate them. If you're following along in the book, it can be found on page 70. Bats. Who will praise them? Who will praise the woodland bats hanging from the stand of trees on Talcott Mountain? The soundless ones, the ones who nurse their pups the size of thimbles, who laud the dark, the moonless nights and fog and rain, who snatch and swallow biting ticks and flying bugs and pollinate while sipping amber nectar. Praise the mysterious, the toothed ones, the skin-winged and eared, who hear what we cannot, who cling to bending branches, who shelter from weasel and snake, and roost slip-knotted to their colony. Praise the little brown bat, the pipistrelle and silver-haired, who navigate magnetic fields, the warm-blooded ghosts who, upside down, locate the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. I want to echo the thanks to Margaret Gibson and Jane O'Connors, to the Riverwood Poetry Series organizers, to their great partnership with Real Artways. I'm very happy to be in this company tonight. I wanted to, if I could say, John Keats wrote a minor poem. I wanted to start with a great first line from it, the poem On a Grasshopper and a Cricket. The poetry of the earth is never dead. And I think we just have to sustain that thought. The only name in this poem that you might, most the poets will know is Jeffers, Robinson Jeffers. He was an early modernist poet that certainly warned about the harm that was coming to the earth. He saw it firsthand in California before many others did. And this poem is called Sea Smoke. From the shore, it looks like the whole world is burning. That odd phenomenon after a cold snap, a smoky fog rising off the waters as far as one can see. I can't see as far as I once could, but I do see and hear the news. Someone spotted a snowy owl behind the beach parking lot, posted a picture of it perched atop a do not enter sign. I know what Jeffers would say, let it burn. Let the people be stewed, swallowed up by the burning seas, so be it. A little too forgiving, with far too much hope. Walking back to the car, I pick up someone's fast food cup, try to shove it down the maw of an overflowing trash can that no one is getting paid to empty. When Gandhi was asked what he thought of Western civilization, he replied, I'm in favor of it. The sun setting in the west turns the eastern sky pink, and I'd like to say the effect made everything more beautiful. No, the sea smoke now backlit as by fire. The ancients made offerings to fire. We offend by making fire our offering.
Thank you, Jim. I'm Joan Hofmann. As a Riverwood board member in tribute to National Poetry Month and our upcoming Earth Day, it's a real pleasure for me to join you tonight to gather around this amazing anthology. Such voices in praise and caution about our Earth's wonder and condition. I bring my voice to the medley tonight with a poem entitled The Takedown. Here, an individual's story serves to tell a larger story of so-called progress at the expense of the environment. As Joni Mitchell once wrote and sang, they paved paradise, put up a parking lot. I live near the Farmington River in the historic district of Collinsville, a lovely village in Canton, a few towns west of Hartford. Recently, an 1850 home uphill and across the street from me was sold. And it turns out that some new zoning regulation, unbeknownst to the seller, allowed for the contiguous land to be a buildable lot. The poem describes my experience of watching the land I've lived next to and the canopy I've lived under for nearly 40 years, cleared to make way for not one, but two houses, each with two apartments, Yes, there will be a parking lot. Page 41, the takedown. I watched giants felled, one after another and another. And the clearing took hours. For hours, I watched in horror and efficiency of decimation. In a single day, the lot next to me transformed from an assurance of green-frilled broad canopy, sustained by 60-foot-high trunks, a beauty of curved barked stalks, into a cleared space. The maples now gone, an until now unseen interior is exposed. Is this awkward gawking addictive or just inherited? Stunned, I am both curious and crestfallen. I'm not the only one disoriented. Like fingernails of dirt, some things you just can't forget. The chew, chew, chew of the cardinal, the silhouette of the maples at daybreak, the mating pileated woodpeckers, the hoot, hoot, hoot of the lone owl, the bone chill noise of the chainsaw, the split crack and thud of the drops, the story's high pile of brush, such a light word for huge limbs that shook earth today. The scream ring of the chipper grinding. Everyone's nest has been upended. In the silence of emptiness, under spareness of a too blue sky, a scatter of sparrows arrives, one bird after another, to make a necklace on top of the new chain link fence. Each stands facing the same direction, toward the now barren space of the uprooted, the missing. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Perfect, good. I'd like to thank Real Artways and you all for having me. It's a pleasure to be a part of this group. In reading and just reading over the book and global climate crisis, it's super unfortunate that we pause, or in the current time, we have to pause the trial of a Minnesota police officer who killed an unarmed Black man to bring you a story of a Minnesota police officer who killed an unarmed Black man just 2 days ago. So it's very unfortunate that, you know, I have to have these conversations with my children. The poem is titled The Talk, page 99. Son, it's time we talked about the birds and the bees. First, I need you to believe that you too can fly. You must protect your wing from some bees because they sting. There's many dangerous animals outside of our nest that invade our tree because their branch is bigger than ours. So what do you do when animals attack? No sudden movements. They may not understand you when you speak, but they know what fears look like, and that invites them closer. So close your mouth and open your eyes. See if you can tell what hives these bees come from. Not all of them stink. But I'm guessing they've seen your wings, so they know that you can fly and sing, and they can only fly and buzz, so they try and bust your shell before you fully hatched. This concrete jungle is full of traps. There's many snakes in the streets that hide in plain sight and invite us to trust and believe in them, but they're bluffing. They're chameleons. They never show their true colors, but may attack you because of yours. So I must teach you to defend yourself. Your tone of voice can resolve problems caused by your tone of skin. It's your words that will spare you. Some animals lack the integrity to interact with the intelligence, so they use intimidation to scare you, but you will stand firm. You will be smart enough to know that sometimes the early bird loses his worm to the bully, but you will take no bull and learn to claw your way out the pits. It's a dog-eat-dog world where uniformed canines are ready to sink their teeth into your dreams, but they only attack if you threaten their pride. I mean, hives. No, you do not have 9 lives. You're just viewed as the black cat with bad luck. And what sucks, if you ever get bit, they can just weasel their way out of it. But back to these bees. They earn their stripes by putting you in them. Some see black and white instead of wrong and right. And if you type, "Why do bees attack?" in the worldwide spider web, it says, and I quote, "Experience has shown bees tend to attack dark things." Now that stings. But I guess it just is what it is. Where we're from, we learn to dance with wolves and we hide from pigs. So what do you do when animals attack? You stand your ground. Spread your wings slowly. Speak softly. Tell them you are still learning to fly and that you only fight with your words and not your fists. But you've seen this happen to too many of your flock. And with you, it may not stop, but one day it will end. And if you should die today, then God will mend your wings in heaven. I told you in the beginning, you must believe that you too can fly. So remind these buzzards that once they sting you, the bee instantly begins to die too. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Luisa Caycedo-Kimura, and I too want to thank Margaret and Riverwood and Real Arts Way and everybody who's out there who took time out from their evening to come hear us read our poems. And I have to echo that it really is an important project. Sadly, it is an important project. I'm excited to be reading this time of year because this is exactly the time of year that I had in mind when I wrote my poem. And, you know, I love gardening. I love being outdoors. And the minute that the weather starts turning warm, I get really excited and immediately start getting dirt under my fingernails. And actually, today I was outside and I was excited seeing bumblebees, and just recently I saw a bear just strolling down my street. So this poem is called Forage. And it's on, page 89 of the book. I turn clay soil, mound rocks, squeeze grubs with my fingers. My spade, the soil, a rasp, a dry northeast heat wave. When I was 5, Mama chopped my hair. Niña salvaje, wild child, always in a tangle, holes in your jeans, grass stains on your sweaters. Through my hair, wind, dust, twigs. Impatient bumblebees, you know we'll have flowers. I poke quack grass, plant deep-rooted cowpeas, mustard, crimson clover, watch for the stealth of a screech owl in flight. Write a letter to my dead mama. How does one awaken this conflicted land? Last night, a black bear in the neighbor's pool. Last night, I almost held berries for it in my hands. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Aaron Caycedo-Kimura. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Pat and Riverwood, for hosting us tonight. My poem in the anthology is on page 90, and it's about my father. My father was a physical therapist by profession, but he was actually born and raised on a farm in San Gabriel, California. He once told me that his father, my grandfather, sired my dad and all his brothers and sisters just so they could work the farm. And in my dad's case, you could take the boy out of the farm, but you couldn't take the farm out of the boy. My father was tied to the land all his life. When he wasn't at work being a physical therapist, he spent most of his time outside working in the garden. In my poem, which is entitled Hand Tilling, I mention Executive Order 9066. And as many of you probably already know, that was the order signed into action by Franklin Roosevelt, which led to the incarceration of 120,000 Japanese Americans during World War II. And my father and his family spent several years in 2 of those camps. I think that working outside in his garden was the way my father found peace of mind after all that. And the garden is where he buried his resentment. Hand tilling. He chuffs his shovel into soil with the sole of his right boot, more dried mud than leather. He balances full weight, both feet, on the shoulders of the shovel, gloved hands rocking the handle, blade prying packed clay. He levers a clod, turns it, hacks it, repeats down an 8-foot row to his right. The smell of earth takes him back to San Gabriel, the family farm of rented acreage before the war, before Executive Order 9066. Eviction, incarceration. After tilling 4 beds, he plants the shovel upright like a gnomon, marking time, rests on the pine bench under the pin oak. He takes a swig from a can of Coors, surveys his garden, never needs to look beyond his fence. Thank you.
I don't see the video changing. I'm seeing Aaron, which I'd love to look at Aaron, but I'm Pegi Dietz Shea. Can you see me? You can. Okay. Sorry about that. Aaron, I'll look at you too. My poem is Wasted Lives, and it begins on 101. Again, I'm Pegi Dietz Shea. I'm the first poet laureate of Vernon. This poem, Wasted Lives, is a sestina, and I often turn to sestinas and pantoums alike when I want to write about something that is repetitive, and often something traumatic that keeps happening over and over again, like mass shootings and chemical warfare. This poem is Wasted Lives, Addis Ababa, March 11, 2017. Outside Ethiopia's capital, the Repi landfill, full of 50 years of refuse, home to thousands of poor displaced by high-rises. Mounts and mounts until it cannot anymore, and the waste avalanches, eliminating scores of lives. Ambassadors of the African Union live in the pricey city, taking their fill of fashion, food, and fun. They waste time debating while they refuse to deal with the people who mount the garbage, foraging for treasures, say misplaced remotes or uneaten crusts. They call the place kosher, which means dust, meaning lives disintegrate beneath these mounts, meaning sloughed skin cells fill surrounding huts, meaning material refuse abides with its own kind, human waste. Some blame the collapse on plastic waste. Others blame the people who placed their homes too close, who refused to live acceptable lives. The poor blame those whose pockets are filled. They claim ecological discrimination. They mount protests against economic injustice. They mount tiny caskets on shoulders. This waste of life, this way is not new. In 2000, the Payatas landfill landslide, the Java avalanche in 2005. Guatemala City places the whole country's trash higher in priority than the 7,000 lives who breathe noxious gases released by its refuse, who fight the fires caused by methane, who refuse to conveniently die for what amounts to a pittance in taxes. Let's examine our lives. In the north end of Hartford, our mountain of waste is housed under a guise of grass. New York City placed its trash in Fresh Kills, Staten Island. China fills and sends barges with bulging amounts of waste to sea, where microfibers and plastic refuse replace lives in the marine food chain, our seafood, our fill. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Pat Hale, as I've mentioned before. I'm honored to have a poem in this book. It's on page 55. It's called A Brief History of Everything. It came out of a 2016 poetry workshop at the Hillstead during the Sunken Garden Poetry Festival, led by then U.S. Poet Laureate Juan Felipe Herrera. It was probably the strangest poetry workshop I ever took, because he spent, it seemed like the first half of the workshop passing out paper, just passing out sheets of paper, different colors, different sizes, different textures. And he just fussed around making sure we all had what we needed. And then he told us to scribble, not to draw anything, but just to make marks. And so then we spent a long time doing that. And then he said, write the legend from your drawing. And surprisingly, this poem just came right out of that. It was like magic. And so that's what I'm going to read to you now. Kind of a grandiose title. It's on page 55 in the book. A Brief History of Everything. Rain. Rain fell for a long time and then it stopped. Rain fell until the ground was washed away and us with it. Then the bird came. Flight. We could all fly and speak the simple language of birds. This is important, the bird said. Remember this. A sharpness to that beak against the ear. Feathers. Another storm, another night, another sea of churning clouds. Hold on, the bird said, and then there were wings reaching out to us. Advice. Let go, the bird said, and we did, but we were afraid. And still the rain kept falling, and us again with it, into the canyon, down to where the river flowed. Recovery. When the storm stopped, the river ran clear. The sun came out. We were amazed. Of course, the bird said, the sun always comes back. Separation. Birds in the air, birds in the cliffs, all watching as we tried to remember the language they'd taught us. It came back, but only to some, and they flew away. Exile. The rest of us remained behind, earthbound, with our heavy feet. Unvoiced, scrabbling in the mud, we made symbols with our sticks and called them words. Thank you.
I'm Julia Paul. I happen to be the elder law attorney and the inaugural Manchester Poet Laureate that Margaret mentioned. The poem I'm going to share with you is on page 60 in the anthology, and it's about water. Because when you think about the natural world, you can't not think about water. 71% of our planet is comprised of water. 60% of the human body is made up of water. Our hearts are 73% water. We can't sustain life without water. Some of us turn on faucets and water spills out. Some, those from Flint, Michigan and the sub-Saharan Africa, deal with chronic water crisis. Wars are fought over water. Water is also, of course, a source of beauty and inspiration and recreation. It's something most of us take for granted. Many don't realize that water shortage is a real problem even in this country, where we're already tapping into some of our reserves. My poem explores water in all its relevance. It's more or less a lyrical poem where sound is as important as meaning, but it's my homage to water. The poem is called Water, Water. Lather of ocean, twist of river, dirty dishwater, water, daughter, cup and saucer, boiling kettle, steam whistle, cup to parched lips, of the homeless, of the refugee, cup to parched lips, of the desert, of the creek bed, rain brailing sand and mud, rain writing on rooftops, on many tongues, water, agua, vatten, Wasser, Voda, Wand. Ashes scattered over waves, mother, brother, lover. Weight of water pressing down, on the brink of rain, on the brink of tears, like holding water in the palms of one's hands, washing hands for 2 minutes, for one Hail Mary, one happy birthday. Songs sung by the water, hum, drum, and simmer. Wings skimming water, light skimming water, light dancing on water. Water, fire, fire, water. Drench, drown, drunk. Reflection in a pond, in bubbles from a wand. Black, blue, silver water, under the moon and stars water. Puddle-stained lane, rainbow oil slick, body hitting water. Jumping from a bridge, rocks in the pocket water. Water under the bridge. Wishes in well water, filtered, fluoridated, flushed water. Chemical wastewater, carbonated, chlorinated, distilled water. Funneled, poured, and puddled water. Water from the faucet, water for chocolate, for crops, drip, drop water, born of water, thirst storming, warming waters, source, shortage, torture, slaughter for water, cistern, aqueduct, tongue, gullet, melting waters, rising tides, in over our heads water. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, Julia, for that. My poem will also is also concerned with water. Thank you all for your words. They are sustenance. It is wonderful to be here with you tonight. My name is Jon Andersen. My last name is spelled S-C-N at the end, unlike the tag on my little square here, just so you don't confuse me with a 1970s lead singer for a prog rock band or a failed third-party presidential candidate, or Jon Andersen, the great poet from Arizona. This poem is on page 76 to 77. It's called For Berta Cáceres. And Berta Cáceres lived from March 4th, 1971 to March 3rd, 2016. She, as many scores of Honduran citizens, was assassinated, killed for her efforts to protect and preserve the waterways, the sacred waterways, the land, and her people against international hydroelectric interests and death squads and corrupt politicians trained, supported with our tax dollars, unfortunately. I wrote this poem after finding out about Berta Cáceres. I found out about her very shortly after her death, and I was gathering information. I watched a short biopic called The Mother of All Rivers, which was filmed shortly before her death. And it was kind of an excruciating experience to watch that film. And I document some of that here. So in a way, this is a synaphrastic poem. I'm dealing with Berta Cáceres, invoking her spirit, her example through the film. For Berta Cáceres. I first learn of your life in the news of your death. So by the time I discover the mother of all rivers, this brief documentary like a deep, bright pool, by the time I hear your voice gliding over jump cuts, boulders rolling and hopping down into the dusty roadblock, clouds parting over dark green peaks, like hands concealing, then revealing a face. By the time I hear you explain, we denounced this dam and were threatened with smear campaigns, imprisonment, and murder. By the time I see Tomas Garcia smiling in his white cowboy hat move into slow-mo, then his coffin bobbing between pallbearers. By the time the film ends on the now agonizing high note of you in profile, a strong current churning past, you are dead. Who were the assassins? What day could not be won by your wide open face, open eyes lit up like those of the girl you used to be? You remind us that in the misty spray, in the cosmos of your people, girls are never victims, will never be caught running away or into the arms of soldiers. They guard the quick bending, frothy uprush of Rio Guacarque. Without them, and in this life, not myth, without you, the river would only tumble so far down from the mountains, would never reach the boy standing at the outcrop, poised to dive, or the corn doing its whispery little dance in the field, the steaming pot, the work clothes dunked and wrung. In the film, you talk and gesture, march alongside the pickup trucks, banners waving above fists and shouts on the long road to the Capitol. Berta, I want to be hidden in a shadow the night they broke into your home, burst out to shoot them before they shoot you. I have never killed anyone, but I swear, or I'd like to believe, I'd gun them down to see your life break through that moment and go on carving the way for us to follow. And yes, my sister, I know that this is just helpless man thinking, that the water rolling along means your life was an imperative for us to look ahead to the next turn, singing. But here you are, drinking coffee with your mama. Here you are insisting. We are only human. Of course we have real fears, but that doesn't mean we are going to be paralyzed by them. And I want to leap into the film as into swift water to save you, you who saved the river. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone who's read tonight. I'm very familiar with your poems, but it is a completely different experience, as we all know, when you're face to face with the poet, even on Zoom and or in a webinar, and hearing the actual human voice wrap itself around those words and give them out to us. So thank you. I'm not going to read the poem of mine that's at the end of the anthology because it's long, but I do want to mention one thing, that there's a line in there that remembers the the last line in Rilke's poem about looking at the bust of Apollo, when it says, we must change our lives. You must change your life. And I think it's not just our lives, but our thinking. I mean, thinking changes, the life changes. I remember reading, listening, teaching a course in nature and poetry years and years ago, and asking my students to define nature. And 90% of them wrote down on their little papers that they turned into me, that which is separate from me, that which is not human. And to my way of thinking, it's this separation, whether it's between people or races or classes, or our sense of separation between ourselves and the earth, that allows us to get into mischief, to hurt each other, to hurt the earth itself. So what I am really so thankful for is to hear your poems, and which close that distance between the human and the natural and the earth, and to say we are one body. We are not separate. I'm going to read a poem. It's a new poem. It's going to be in the Glass Globe, called "Because the Earth." I just want to mention that after hearing John's poem, I'm not recommending in this poem that planting dahlias will save the earth, although that is the act that's recommended. Whatever we do as an act of beauty that holds one thing up and says, we love this, we do it over and over again, that is a small act of resistance. It's a huge act of love, and it's what everything is rooted in and based on. Being more aware of ecology has made me much more aware of interrelationships. I'm a lyric poet. I love to make beautiful lists. They sound great, right? There's some beautiful lists in here, but they're lists of sentient, of plants and animals that depend on each other. They are a group. They're related. They're interdependent. They form an ecosystem. So, because the earth. Because the earth as we know it will end, I plant dahlias. And because dahlias will fade, in late fall, I dig up their roots to make a potion that dyes my scarf of white silk, the color of the earth. And because the scarf will wear out and will shred, I untie it from around my neck. Off it flies into the wind with prayer flags. And because my neck will someday not be needed to hold up my head, I take down a recipe for stock, good bone broth. And because my head takes stock of each leaf as it settles onto the dark, shining surface of the pond, I reach for an invisible spool of red cord, not the cord, and begin mending the net we've torn. This net made of air and ocean, made of sun and soil. At junctures woven into this net are jewels whose each facet reflects star groves and owls, minnows and eelgrass, meadowlarks, milkweed, and monarchs, so that each apparently single thing exists in the light of everything else. And because the net also trembles as it senses the glacial erratic in any heart that just sits there and sits there and sits there, a mute lament. And because each of us has the power to turn harm into healing, and because the earth as we know it will end. Just now, I plant dahlias. Thank you. I just want to close with just a few very, very brief remarks. we've had, I think of poetry as the act of recreation, of recreating what is, of transforming it in our imaginations and creating something that is and is also passed through us so that there's a unity. I think of writing poems as an act of resistance to whatever hurts others and harms the earth. And I think of writing poems as an act of restoration. So restoring that sense of unity between ourselves and the earth is what I have in mind at the moment. I think writing poems about the natural world is a natural. When you surrender to the images of the nature poem or the eco poem, if you really let them into your mind, then you can close the distance, the apparent distance between yourself and the earth. Words have that power. Images have that power. They can show you what is vanishing, and by the magic of words, create presence, not permanence, but presence. And to my way of thinking, poetic language returns us to where we live, our material habitat, brings the sensuous earth to our attention. With attention comes presence. With presence comes new understanding. With new understanding come words to communicate what we know. In a habitat of words and imagination, we can forge a new relationship with the earth. I truly believe that, and I think your poems will make a huge difference in fostering conversation, encouraging conversation, and helping all of us to change our lives in ways that we need to. We are in danger too. It's not just the earth. We're not separate from it. And it's really important to remember that it's in our interest and in the interest of everything else. Actually, the earth will be okay. It won't be this earth, but in about 5 million years, if the worst happens, the earth will be here. But us, it'll be as if we were never here. So let's not let that happen. I want to thank everyone for being here, and I want to turn it back to Pat to see if there are any questions from our wonderful audience, and thank you all for coming. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Margaret. And thanks to all our readers, thanks to our audience, and thank you, Real Artways, as always, for your invaluable support. At this moment, I don't know, let me take a look. The last time I looked, we did not have any questions. However, nope, still no questions. To our audience, there is time to enter any questions and comments. If you go to the bottom of your screen to where it says Q&A, you can enter something. I'm going to mention a few upcoming events, and then if any of our panelists would like to ask each other questions, that's also a possibility. And I suggest we do that by raising hands. But first, please let me mention a couple upcoming events. This Thursday, April 15th, Margaret Gibson will be the featured reader at Wintonberry Poetry Series, 7 p.m. Her reading will be followed by an open mic. And of course, this is a virtual event, Zoom. So you have to sign up ahead of time, and you can do that on the Bloomfield Public Library website, which is bplct.org. bplct.org. A second event is an open mic reading and competition on the theme, The Environment and the Natural World. This will be held Sunday, May 23rd in the outdoor classroom at Westmore Park in West Hartford, 2 to 3:30. To be eligible, your poem must deal with an aspect of nature, climate, or the environment, and you need to bring a paper copy because the judging will be done on the spot after you read. Prizes will be awarded in student and adult categories. These prizes are gift cards in the amounts of $75, $50 and $25. It is sponsored by Margaret Gibson's Poetry and Environment Initiative and Westmore Park. Judges and featured readers are Margaret Gibson and Sarah Strong. Pegi Dietz, Shea, did you want to make an announcement about your event?
Sure. This coming Sunday, April 18th, we are going to have live, real, in-person poetry through my series in Vernon, Poetry Rocks. And it will feature Margaret Gibson, of course, and David K. Leff. And I will be reading as well. It is at Henry Park in Vernon, and you can just Google that and find it very, very easily off of exit 67 off 84. It's 3 o'clock, Poetry Rocks, Green Poetry Cafe, live and in person. Thank you.
Are there any other announcements or questions for each other?
I have a question I can throw out and anyone can answer it if you feel like it, or you could duck, whatever. There's a wonderful phrase, spark bird, for the first bird you ever saw that sparked your imagination and got your enthusiasm going and made you a confirmed birder and lover of feathered things. So I'm wondering, I'm going to borrow from that phrase and ask, is there anyone who wants to talk about your spark experience in nature? You know, what do you remember that turned you on and got you going and made you get your fingernails in the dirt or follow birds wherever they lay, you know, float down rivers, do whatever you do, write about nature in your poems? What's your spark experience? Luisa?
Yeah, I can't say that. Look, I was born in Colombia, South America, and we used to live in just a house that had a huge yard, and you know, this Colombia, so lots of birds, lots of nature, and we were just constantly surrounded by it. I used to spend so much of my time in the backyard, just playing, climbing trees and whatever. And even when we were indoors, we had a Spanish style house, which had open courtyards. So I think that for me, it was just natural to always, I mean, I had always been surrounded by nature. So that's where my love of nature came. And, you know, once we moved to the United States and we were living in New York in an apartment, and I would just spend a lot of time at the park because that's where you came in contact with nature.
Someone else? Yeah, Pegi.
This is a reminder that nature can also be dangerous and be frightening too. One of the first poems I ever got published, it was during college, and it was about a traumatic experience I experienced vicariously by watching a crow land on my little brother's head when he was about 3, and he couldn't do anything to get rid of it, and I was frozen on the front porch, and it was just flapping on his head, and I didn't have Hitchcock to, you know, blame it on or anything. But I got a poem out of it. Does that help? And I've since learned a lot about crows, and they are amazing creatures.
Well, I hate to admit this, but when there was a plum tree in my backyard that I would climb in the spring, and I could get up I read books in it, but I also sometimes would climb up in the tree and balance on the branch and pretend that the plum tree was a spaceship. And I would whirl around in it and go everywhere in the world and up in the stars. And it was just this beautiful blossoming around me that made me feel, I think, that I could take flight. It was incredible. But before, I want to bring you down to earth too, because I mean, I'm also the kid who stomped on a bee out of pure spite. I thought it was dead. And of course, guess who got stung? So yeah, I got, you have your scary experiences, you have the wonderful ones, but I think it was that experience of reading books in trees and flying around in my plum tree that, you know, just marked me for life.
I lived across the street from a ravine in Erie, Pennsylvania for a few years when I was a kid, and that was like magic world to me. Just.
What was in the ravine?
There was a little gunky stream at the very bottom that eventually made its way down to the bay of Lake Erie. And in the winter, fish would get frozen into the ice. And so we used to catch them in the spring and try to save them by taking them upstream to this horribly polluted little stream and putting them in it. Glory of nature. There's one comment. Sharon Smith is saying to Chief Peterson that she found the talk very powerful. I don't know if he's still on or if he could see it.
Yep.
You saw it? Good. Excellent.
Anyone else? Pat talking about the ravine just made me remember being in Mexico on a spiritual retreat. And when we met in the morning for services, we would look out the window and there were beautiful trees and fields. And we knew there was a ravine there somewhere too, but couldn't quite see it. During the week, we made visits into the town and into neighborhoods. And one day we spent the entire day in the neighborhood that was actually in the ravine where the homeless people lived. And I've never forgot, I remember catching my breath and thinking, all this time I've been looking out the window at the jacaranda trees and the beautiful blossoms. I've been also looking over the heads of the ravine where people who have no other place to live are living. And again, I think it's important to make those intersections between the beauty of the natural world and the wholeness of the earth, and also not to omit the harm that happens and the suffering that people go through, and the kinds of, again, I keep coming back to that sense that separation and not understanding that we're connected is at the heart of it. So it really meant something to me to see through the flowering jacaranda tree and know that what I wasn't seeing, but what was there, was that neighborhood of human beings. So that sparked something too. So.
I have a message from Rennie McQuilkin. He said, please say hello to all. The reading has been a memorable experience. So many images will be indelible to me, such as Aaron's father standing with both feet on a shovel, digging into the good earth rather than being bitter about his terrible internment. His celebration of the earth is a marvel. He may not be planting dahlias, but he is planting and planting. Thank you, Rennie.
Rini has 2 poems in the anthology too, for those of you listening.
Well, I think we're at the end of our evening, unless anyone has any comments or any more questions in the chat here. No. Thank you, Margaret, for the anthology, for dedicating, am I unmute? No. For dedicating so much time and passion to this project. I'm so proud to be in the book. I'm so happy to have the book. And I'm going to hold it up here so everyone can see it. It's beautiful. You can order it from graceandbooks.com. Please come out Thursday to hear Margaret. Please come out next month on May 11th to hear Vivian Shipley. That'll be a great reading. And to participate in the open mic. Thank you to Real Artways and to all my fellow poets. Bye, good night, and our evening is complete.